when you think about asynchronous management or communication versus synchronous communication, I like to harken back to, I don't know how old you are, Matt, but I remember not having Netflix or Amazon Prime or any of these kind of streaming services. And I remember Friday at 8:30 p.m., if I wasn't at the TV at exactly 8:30 p.m., I would end up missing Friends, which was, or Seinfeld, actually. I remember way back in the day, I really enjoyed Seinfeld. And you wouldn't, if you showed up 45 minutes or 15 minutes late, you'd miss the first half of that episode, and you'd have to wait an entire year for the reruns to be able to pop up and watch them again. So that's synchronous communication. And then Netflix is asynchronous communication. It allows for people to be interrupted and consume information when they choose. And we're just simply extrapolating this inside of basically an organization, as opposed to, watching Netflix, or hopefully that you keep all your episodes of Friends targeted. Now, in terms of just engagement and communication, what most of the remote teams pre-pandemic recognized was, if we have teams all over planet Earth, we have to pay a sunk cost every single time we collaborate. So every time we collaborate synchronously, we all have to jump on a Zoom call. We all have to get prepared for a meeting, 10 or 15 minutes beforehand. But inside of office environments, which are primarily synchronous, and by the way, asynchronous management can be applied to an in-office environment just as much as it can be applied to a remote environment. This is something that I'm very excited about trying to test on, in-office environments where you're not going to have as many distractions anymore. You're going to be able to effectively work asynchronously, just like you did when you were working at home.
Yeah.
But when you work in an office, everyone pays that sunk cost. So everyone pays 90 minutes on average of their time to be able to come to a single place. And then when you get to that single place, you say to yourself, it's a collaboration buffet. As much collaboration as you want, you can do in that particular space. Remote teams, however, have recognized that we can use an a la carte method. We can collaborate when we need to, synchronously, but then the vast majority of our communication can actually be done asynchronously, which allows for the real theoretical framework that a lot of remote pioneers have used, which is my friend Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, which is effectively the ability for anyone to be able to have everything at their disposal to solve very difficult problems. If you can solve difficult problems faster than your competitors, I don't care if you are, if you're a concrete installer, I got a guy across the street from me that's putting in a basement, or if you're Google, you're going to actually beat out your competitors, because innovation is really the key to success in the 21st century business world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so one thing that I'm thinking here, is, all right, so, there's some human connection with coworkers is an important part of work, right? So if all communication is asynchronous, and I know you've mentioned there was one particular engineer you have on your team who's turned out great, who you've never even had a video call with. Is some of the synchronous communication video, so that you can, even though you're not talking real time, there's still that human connection where you're seeing like, oh, there's Liam's face. I can see his emotion behind what he's saying. Is that an important part of this from your view?
It definitely is, to a degree. I think when you think about remote first organizations, you have to remove the concept of management and replace it with leadership. So in my study of approximately, more than $12 billion plus remote first organizations that were remote before the pandemic, one of the most interesting insights that I found is their managerial layer was about 50% thinner than their on-premise counterparts. So there are more people doing work in asynchronous remote organizations than there are people managing people doing work, because the actual management mechanics is run by the platform. It's run by the project management system. It's run by the documentation that you have inside of your organization. So it allows for you to really focus on EQ issues. Like, I have meetings with my team members. We don't talk about work, because the vast majority of those things, to be honest with you, are not really what holds people back from doing a really good job at their job.
Absolutely.
It's, I have a conflict with one of my coworkers. I have a conflict in my family. I have a conflict with some of my friends or my children.
Mhm.
A couple of weeks ago, I ended up having a chat with one of my direct reports, and she talked about how her family dog had recently died and her two children were taking it very badly.
Mhm.
I think they were like 6 and 9 as an example.
Mhm.
Well, what's the solution for that? Well, instead of me looking at her metrics, because I already knew what all her metrics were because it's all documented inside of our systems and automated, I could instead really focus on, well, why don't we get like a betterhelp.com to be able to jump on with your kids and see how they can deal with this, because I know that that's probably really stressful on you. And that's the real way to be able to boost that person's productivity, that extra 10 to 20% that ends up producing dividends long term, in my opinion.
Oh,
So forget about management, focus on leadership.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. The more you can get management out of the human interaction and just have it managed by a platform, I think the better. That, as you mentioned, that frees up leaders to do what is really important, which is, what does my team need to thrive? What's getting in the way of them thriving, both professionally and personally? So my question there, though, is like, just as a follow-up, is like, so that's a perfect example. So you have someone who's probably a little anxious because her kids are really upset about the loss of a family pet, or maybe in a different situation, it's even more serious, loss of a loved one. So when you're having this communication about helping her, are you doing that face to face, or is it at least like you recorded a video to say it, or is this just literally via email and chat?
So sometimes it's face to face, and generally you need face to face to be to open up the EQ side of the conversation. We have
Mm,
something, a phenomenon that a lot of remote first companies implement, which is called silent meetings. So every single week, we have a standing meeting with our executive team, and we're not going to have it tomorrow because we put down all of our issues that we need to address in that particular meeting. So we don't talk about metrics. No one brings us through how our numbers were, because that's all documented and it needs to be reviewed before you actually jump into that meeting.
mm,
But what we do look at is issues. And we communicate and we address those issues asynchronously. So we'll put in comments, and sometimes we'll have 40, 50 comments on a particular issue. But if we come to a conclusion, we take that conclusion, we post it at the top of the ticket, and then we complete the ticket. And if we have less than 3 issues per week, we don't have the meeting.
nice.
And that allows for, number one, everyone, those 7 executives that all make, 6-figure salaries, it allows them to be able to get 90 minutes back per week. But the other interesting phenomenon that I've found is the issues that stick around have nothing to do with the operation of the business, or how, there's no technical issue there. It's almost entirely relationship issues.
Mm,
It is, hey, someone else has an issue with another person inside of the organization, and we need to be able to address it. And sometimes it's not as direct as that. Obviously, you have to kind of go underneath that to be able to get to the core of it. But again, that's what really focuses, at least for me, making sure that I'm engaging in a leadership capacity and not necessarily a managerial capacity. Because I'm sure you've been in companies where it's like, I give Matt my numbers, Matt gives his manager my numbers, that manager gives the boss my numbers. Inside of asynchronous organizations, we try to make sure that everyone has the same informational advantage as the CEO of the company.
mm,
So when you join the company, you get access to our P&L, you get access to all of our customers, how much they're making, you get complete and open honesty. There are no undocumented conversations inside of our organization, and everyone has access to all conversations, save for salary levels of employees. That's the only thing that we hold back.
mm,
And it allows for us to, number one, recognize that our employees really trust us because we're trusting them and we're giving them all this information.
mhm.
But more importantly, when we need to make difficult decisions, almost everyone recognizes that that was the right decision to make. And if they all say it wasn't, then we actually reverse our decision. So it's kind of like leadership through democratized process. Although obviously, if we need to make a decision, we make it, even if people disagree. Sometimes we do push forward those ideas, but very rarely do we have that type of resistance, because everyone knows, oh, we actually have to trim the engineering team by 10%. Otherwise, we're going to be out of business in the next 6 months.